Welcome to the Sex Science Podcast, where we turn the latest peer-reviewed research on intimacy and sexuality into fun, accessible conversations. Generated by AI and fact-checked by experts, the Sex Science Podcast was created by LaShaw to empower you through knowledge. So, join us as we explore pleasure, relationships, human connection, and everything in between.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some research about single people and what affects how happy they are.
The research we'll be looking at today is from a 2022 study. It was published in Frontiers in Psychology. So this study, instead of comparing single people to people in relationships, it actually looks at what makes single people happy within that single group. And they used a statistical technique called latent profile analysis to look at a large group over 4,800 single adults in the U.S. A pretty substantial sample size. And the findings are pretty fascinating.
Okay, so spill the tea. What did they find?
So they found 10 distinct profiles of single people.
10?
Yeah.
Whoa, okay. What factors did they look at? How did they break it down?
So the researchers focused on 5 factors that previous studies have shown to be strong predictors of well-being. So whether someone is single or partnered, these factors tend to play a role. And those 5 factors are friendship satisfaction, family satisfaction, self-esteem, neuroticism, and extroversion. Pretty broad categories, covering different aspects of personality and social life.
Before we dive into all 10.
Yeah, because that could get a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it might be a bit much. What are the big trends that the researchers found?
Absolutely. So one of the most striking findings that the majority of single people in the study reported being very happy with their lives.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is really interesting because it challenges that stereotype of the lonely, unhappy single person. So it really highlights how diverse the experiences of single people are. They're not all pining away for a partner. Many of them are quite content.
Okay, so that's really interesting. And so we were talking about those happiest profiles.
They consistently had high levels of satisfaction in both friendship and family relationships.
Okay, cool. So what about self-esteem and personality traits? Did those have any impact at all?
Well, self-esteem definitely played a significant role. Those with higher self-esteem tended to report higher levels of happiness.
So it's like a good foundation.
Yeah, it seems like a strong sense of self-worth is really important for everyone, but maybe even more so for single people.
Okay, so we've talked about most single people being happy, relationships being important. What about the people who are struggling? Were there any common threads among those less happy profiles?
There were. So the unhappiest profiles consistently showed a pattern: weaker relationships, lower self-esteem, higher neuroticism, and lower extroversion.
So if you're somebody who's more anxious or more introverted, does that mean you're going to be unhappy if you're single?
No, not at all. I mean, remember, these are just trends, and everyone is different. The study showed that even those with higher neuroticism or lower extroversion could still experience happiness, especially when they had strong relationship and high self-esteem.
So it really is about all these different factors kind of working together.
Exactly. It's not just one thing, this interplay of multiple influences. It's not just as simple as strong relationships equal happiness, and that's the end of the story.
There's more to it.
Yeah, there's definitely more nuance to it.
Okay, can you give me an example of that?
Absolutely. So one of the profiles that stood out to me had incredibly high levels of friendship satisfaction, but very low family satisfaction. Almost as low as the unhappiest group.
So they were finding fulfillment and support from their friends, even if they weren't getting it from family.
Yeah, exactly. Their strong friendships seem to compensate for that lack of fulfillment in their family lives. And this profile still reported high life satisfaction overall. And another profile kind of showed the opposite of that. These folks had amazing family ties, but very low satisfaction with their friendships. And they were still considered a happy profile. But it does make you wonder if their overall well-being could be even higher if their social circle was a bit more fulfilling.
More friends, yeah.
Yeah, they're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Another thing that I was thinking about is that we've talked about how most single people are happy, but there's still a decent amount that are struggling. What can we learn from those people?
Well, as we've discussed, weaker social connections and lower self-esteem were common themes among the unhappy profiles. But the study also highlighted some other potential vulnerabilities.
Okay, like what?
For example, those who were struggling financially were more likely to report lower life satisfaction.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Money problems could be really stressful.
Absolutely, financial stress can be a major source of anxiety and unhappiness, regardless of relationship status. And it's important to remember that these different factors often interact and kind of compound each other.
It's not just one thing.
Yeah, it's not just one thing in isolation. If you're dealing with financial stress, it might be harder to maintain those strong relationships or to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, like a domino effect almost.
Exactly. One area of struggle can impact other areas of your life.
So we've talked about,
a lot of different things.
all this stuff about single people. What would you say are like the key takeaways?
Okay, so I think first and foremost, this study reminds us that single people are not a monolithic group. They're just as diverse as any other population group, and their experiences of happiness are shaped by complex interplay of factors.
So we shouldn't make generalizations about single people.
Right. We need to recognize that everyone's experience is unique.
Gotcha.
Second, I think this research really highlights the importance of strong relationships for single people's well-being. Whether it's friendships, family connections, having that supportive network is crucial for navigating life's challenges and finding happiness.
And it's not just about how many relationships you have, right?
It's about the quality of those relationships as well. A few close, meaningful connections can be more impactful than a large but superficial social circle. And finally, I think this study challenges us to think more broadly about how we can better support single people in our society. How can we create communities and systems that foster belonging, connection, and well-being for everyone, regardless of relationship status?
That's a really good question. What do we do with this information? How can we actually use it to help people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it goes beyond just this one study. What we're really talking about is shifting societal perceptions and creating environments where everyone feels supported and can thrive, no matter what their relationship status is.
So it's not just about individual support. It's also about changing systems.
Exactly. Think about it. So many of our social structures, tax benefits, healthcare policies, they're still geared towards married couples. And this can create a sense of disadvantage for single people, especially those who are struggling financially.
The system itself is saying that
it's almost like being single is less than being partnered.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can really impact people's self-esteem and their overall well-being.
So part of the solution is actually changing those policies.
Yeah, advocating for policies that recognize and support the diverse needs of single people.
Okay, so that's on a big level. What about on a more personal level? What can I do to support my friend who's single?
Well, I think first and foremost, just be mindful of your language and your assumptions. Avoid making generalizations about single people or pressuring them to find a partner.
Yeah, respect their choices.
Yeah, exactly. Acknowledge that their happiness isn't contingent on being in a relationship.
Totally. And we can also try to be more inclusive in our social gatherings.
Absolutely. Don't assume that your single friends always want to be set up. Invite them to things because you enjoy their company.
Just to hang out.
Right, exactly.
Definitely. I think this has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot about the different experiences of single people.
It's been a fascinating deep dive.
It has. And as we wrap up today, I just want to thank all of you for listening.
Yes, thank you all for joining us.
And we hope that you've learned something new and maybe feel inspired to create a more inclusive world for everyone.
For sure.
No matter what their relationship status is.
Thank you for listening to the Sex Science Podcast brought to you by LaShaw. We hope that you learned something new about the wonderful world of human intimacy and sexuality, and join us next time as we dive into more fascinating research. And remember, science is for you. Music for this podcast was produced by SOUNDRAW.